All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast, and we've got an amazing episode for you today. It is Q&A day. We've got someone who's asking, how do you get life partners on the same page? We cover that. We're also talking to an investor who is going for their third investment property, and they've got a question around how to structure the loans. Ben, what else do we cover?
Well, Bryce, we also have a problem with fundamental misunderstanding around borrowing and cash flow impacts. So we unpack that story. And finally, in what's making property news, Trump and tariffs. Trump and tariffs. We go deep on that. And what does it mean for interest rates in Australia?
Trump and tariffs, folks. You've got to hear all about that. Let's rip into the show.
Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance, and money management.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast, and welcome back to you too, mate. How are you?
Mate, I'm always excited on days when it's a Q&A day. It's a Q&A day.
We get to talk to the questions that the people want to hear. So
love it.
You're quite right, but let's tidy up a couple of things before we get there, Ben.
Sure.
propertycouch.com.au/playbook-waitlist. Mate, there's over 800 people on that list. So if you want to be one of the informed few who will know in advance, I want to just recommend that you get on that. So propertycouch.com.au/playbook-waitlist. And if you want to pre-order with some of the other exciting partners who are taking this up, we've had Big W. Big W have taken a big order, Ben. Didn't happen on the first two books, happened on the third one, which is great. That's exciting.
Yes.
So you can get it at Big W, you can get it on Amazon. And we recently charted #1. Newcomer, pre-ordered bestseller. That's pretty cool. That's exciting.
On Amazon. That was very, very nice. I was, thank you. Thanks to all those people who are looking forward to reading our new book.
Yeah, I think the hook's actually, I think that I'm intrigued to see how that one goes. You can go to Booktopia, you can go to Angus and Robertson. So if you want to go on our wait list, or you want to go and buy it from any of those wonderful retailers, normally the retail price is $32.99, Ben. Our publisher sets that, not us. So all of those ones we just described, including our wait list, will be below that price. So go and check that out. Hey, Ben, we've had we've had a pretty decorated journey, you and I, over 20 years of helping people buy investment properties. But recently we've branched out to help build the base so that we can still continue the mission of helping people as an investor. What have we done?
Yes, Bryce, it's exciting, right? Like, ultimately, we are now in a position, because our clients were asking for it. They said, when are you going to help me buy a home rather than just investment properties?
Yes.
And so what we've been able to do is so just starting in Melbourne and surrounding areas. So, we'll go down the peninsula, we'll go to Geelong, we'll look at those commutables. We now have a dedicated buyer's agent who is going to buy you your next home or your forever home or potentially even your first home. So if you're interested in that, it's not going to be a sales pitch. Just jump on the Empower Wealth website and just click on book an appointment where it says buy a home, and then we will basically be in contact with you and you can learn more about our services.
Very exciting to help people make sure they make the right decisions, because even though it's practical, Ben, even though it's an essential need, we want to keep a little eye on the performance of the property as well if we can.
We do.
And there's been some changes to the Moorr app, Ben. What were they?
Yeah, so a couple of weeks back I said, hey, stand by in the mobile app. The web app's got all of these amazing insights and features, and the mobile app's also got some great features. But what we've added is the historical insight tracking to both assets and also borrowing. So two big things we want to be following is the borrowings going down and the asset values going up. And so we can now track that. And just also remember, our as at date feature means you can go way back in history. So you can actually put in when you first bought it, and then it'll also calculate the annual capital growth that you've enjoyed, all of those fabulous features. So that's on the mobile app version of Moorr now. That's one of our recent releases. So I just thought I'd bring it to everyone's attention.
Very good. And before we go into Q&A day, Ben, just want to remind folks that it's just over a month now, Ben,
Yes.
where we've got the charity event for my 50th, which I'm super pumped about. But well, what we've done, Ben, is there's a group of incredible people that we've assembled who are coming with us, and we've got this WhatsApp group. And we talk within the WhatsApp group, and we share ideas and excitement and all the build and the energy that's coming for that, which is really, really cool.
It's amazing.
Shout out to those people, because I got to say, it brings me a lot of joy. But Jeff, who's part of that group, Ben, just recently sent me a note within that WhatsApp group and said, hey, listen, just want you to know that this is what he said, it sounds so much more tangible and real when expressed as fundraising to give sight to unsighted people. I thought, okay, that's very good. He goes, this is what he said, I loved that in the very first birthday announcement, it was all about giving sight. I signed up and paid within 10 minutes. And I'm thinking, okay, well, if this means that we can help more people, Ben, I'm actually happy to take Jeff's counsel here. So we are trying to give sight to unsighted people. So sight for one person, Ben, that's right, to give one person the sight back $100. Mm-hmm. 2 people's 200, 5 people 500, 10 people is $1,000. So under that, I'm excited to say that our family is going to help over 100 people get their sight back just for our own personal donations. So that
is incredible.
Makes it super, super tangible. So folks, so what I'm asking is we're doing a target within our community of podcast listeners of $10,000 by May the 27th. And all you need to do is go to thepropertycouch.com.au/donation. If you want to be a part of the celebration of the 50th and help people who can't see Ben see again. And we will be bringing back a sort of a documentary style of what we've been doing. If you want to help one person, $100 donation would be amazing. Now, the point is anything you can afford is part of it. But for one person, it's $100. So super excited. So folks, if there's been any value, I would love for you to get on board. It is something that I bar none, it's one of the most exciting things we're going to do this year. All right, let's move on, Ben. The Mindset Minute theme today is very, very simply this. When you make big life decisions, don't listen to the people closest to you. Listen to the people closest to your goals.
Ooh,
how good's that?
That's very sharp. It's sharp, isn't it? It's sharp. I like it.
Don't listen to the people who are in proximity to you. Listen to people who are in proximity to what you want. That's pretty good. That's pretty compelling. That's why it's super simple, super straightforward. It tells a very compelling story. So there you go, folks. Marinate on that as we go into the Q&A day, Ben. Let's launch in. All right, mate, let's get into the body of the show today. It's Q&A day. We love it. Our community gives us questions for us to answer. And it's when you're in a podcast, Ben, it's one of those strange things, isn't it, where it's you and me chatting and we don't know who's actually listening. But when we actually get the feedback from the people that we're here and called to serve, it's kind of really nice. So this first question here is from Jason. He has a question around bridging the gap on property investment with his partner. And here it is, Ben. My partner and I have different perspectives on property investment. While I'm following our property plan, our Empower Wealth property plan that considers our long-term strategy with our lifestyle by design, she's concerned about the initial negative gearing and short-term costs. This recently came up when we purchased an investment property. Her background as a chartered accountant makes her very detail-oriented, and the initial financial outlay understandably worries her. I believe there's a way to bridge this gap by clearly communicating our overall financial goals and the long-term benefits of property investment. However, getting her engaged in these conversations is proving difficult. She is the plumber who doesn't like doing their own plumbing. What I'd like to know is how can I effectively communicate the long-term benefits of property investment to address her short-term concerns? What strategies can I use to encourage her to participate in financial planning conversations? Ben, good question. Hey, listen, I reckon there's a lot of people that could really relate to Jason's question because you and I are really blessed in our worlds where we've got our our life partners, our dearly beloveds that are on the same page. But there are a lot of people that that don't share that, including Jason here in terms of paradigms. So really good question for, I reckon, a bunch of our audience that would really relate to it.
Yeah, I think so, Bryce. And I think there's potentially a clue in the work that that she might do. Like, I'll give you an example. One of our neighbours is a property lawyer, and he just litigates property disputes. And usually those property disputes are around builders doing the wrong thing, or, you know, the quality of work, or whatever it might be. So you can imagine when they do their own renovations or their own, property pieces, that they're very skeptical. They're just naturally concerned about, that everyone's out to get everyone else and so forth, because they've got this sunk cost bias. They've got this recency bias. They've got all these behavioural things that are happening in the background. So I can appreciate that. And I think, in our cases, when we met our, loves of our lives and we got married later on, we were already investing. And so they've been able to come on a journey and build up their knowledge, and are now supportive of that. But I can really appreciate that at a starting point, that there's ultimately going to be this situation where you may not necessarily be on the same page. Now, part of that process should be really about what are those important goals, and getting that balance right between, the wants and the needs now versus the haves in the future. And, I always like to sort of think about this is that your retirement will be dictated by your financial circumstances at that time. And I think that's an important message, because what we get to enjoy with two professional incomes or whatever might be happening in that household right now could be really good balance, and then all I'm seeing is, we're throwing out all this good surplus income towards running this investment that's currently making a loss. And so from a chartered accountant's point of view, you shouldn't be throwing money at something that's making a loss, because it just doesn't quite make sense in terms of all of the coaching and teaching that I've had. But I always then say, well, let's bring it back to really fundamental basics for me. And this is historically evidence-based. How has property performed over the last 50 or so years, right? And then you say to yourself, well, it does seem to trend up. So it does seem to accumulate over time. And what's behind that? Well, land values, scarcity, status, all of those things ring true. The reason why it's decoupled from just the income story is because there's now a lot of people who have a lot of wealth in other properties, so they don't just need their income to service their debt. They've got profits from other activities. They've got inheritances. All of that cycle of wealth that's continually keep building up. So that's why this. If I listen to people saying, now it's 12 times, 13 times the average income to pay for a home, I just say, and what's your point? Because the reality is that there's a lot of wealth in our community. And so as long as the economic environment and activity continues to grow, and the economic pie in Australia continues to grow, fundamentally that means that property is going to keep growing. So at some point in time, that property will move from negative to neutral to then positive income. And that's ultimately what you're trying to do. So coming back to what I said before, your retirement will be dictated by your financial circumstances at that time. You planted that seed, that the tree's grown, and then ultimately you're starting to live off that passive income, but also that wealth accumulation that's occurred there. And I think if I'm having a practical conversation, that's the way in which I would be framing that up, to sort of say, look, if that isn't true, then I can understand your concern. But the evidence suggests that, and even with, this transition of wealth, over $3 trillion of wealth is going to be transferred down. It does bode well for continued growth of land and property prices across Australia.
Yeah, well said, Ben. There's one of my mentors when I first started in the game had this statement to say: "A man convinced against his will remains unconvinced still." And I now say that man is short for human, right? So a man convinced against their will remains unconvinced still. So this is a perception versus perspective conversation that Jason needs to have with his wife, because he could have a perception of what he thinks she needs to hear, But until he gets her perspective, it's all going to be futile because
Yeah.
a man convinced against their will remains unconvinced still, right? So I think we need to get into Jason's wife's mind and go, what's important to you? What are your fears and concerns and why? And most importantly, acknowledge, not dismiss her concerns, right? So clearly,
Really important.
for any of us who have been in relationships for a long time know that anyone who's large and in charge, that's never a recipe for success. We have to have all concerns listened to and everyone addressed. So here's a couple of things that I could think of, Jason, that you could consider. So number one, low pressure conversations. So you've said in the question that not really keen to engage in any conversation. So it sounds like you're trying to have those conversations and there's no engagement. So I would create low pressure conversations. So think about glass of wine, on a walk, some activity where it's just a by the way conversation. So minus the spreadsheets. Let's just see if we can get into perspective mode here and go, what's going on for you? Because I would start with values, not numbers. And a conversation for me would look a little bit like, what do you want our life to look like in 10 years? Right? Who doesn't want a dream build, Ben? Let's be honest. What do you want your life to look like in 10 years? And just let the magic flow and see what comes out. And it's not linked at all to the plan. It's not linked to, because even in the planning, Ben, we talk about bucket lists and bring that into the mix and all that sort of stuff. But we're going to be 10 years older in 10 years, whether we do something or we don't, right? 10 years is going to pass. So that is a fact. So what do we want that to look like? So, and then part of the conversation I'd be encouraging you to do is let your wife choose her lane. So she clearly exceeds in some things. You guys would be yin and yang. So what's her yin to your yang? And then make sure that she's in her lane on that yin or the yang, because she's clearly good with numbers. So she might want to be across all of the cash flow to build the confidence that comes from that. And you might actually build in, okay, there's some anxiety here that's real and present and something we can't sweep under the carpet. So why wouldn't we have predetermined review times? Why wouldn't we agree to a 10-minute a month review to stay on top of that overwhelm? And it could just be the glass of wine or the little walk or whatever it is that you would consider. So, and then, of course, bring in a neutral third party, Ben. So a trusted friend or advisor, because they have the reason we can give better advice to other people than we can take ourselves, Ben, is because if you're asking for me for advice, Ben, most of it is logic based, right? I've got emotion attached to the friendship that we've had over a long period of time, but most of it's logic. Whereas when we're giving the advice to ourselves, it is not devoid of emotion. There is a ton of emotion, and that's why we're better giving advice to others than we are taking our own advice. So I would say bring in a trusted advisor, or what we hope is that this attempt at answering your question, Jason, can be a conversation starter that you have with your wife so that you can actually ask her to watch or listen to this. And again, one of the things that Ben and I do in our recent webinar, we do it in a masterclass, we've just written about it in our book as well, is we teach people how to have unshakable confidence in investing despite everything that's going on, including paralysis by analysis, perfectionism, all of those sorts of traits that come from people who are detail oriented. And it's lifting your eyes. It's leading with the why. It's looking at the horizon, not looking down. I always say if we're crossing a large chasm between two cliffs, Ben, and we're on a tightrope, if we were to focus on the horizon, we generally can remain steady. But as soon as we look down, that's when we're in a world of pain, right? So we've got to make sure that we're helping your wife, if she's detail oriented, lift her eyes and look towards the horizon. And then here's the one, Ben, and I'll pass it over to you. Remind the accountant that even the most cautious accountants consider opportunity cost. And so opportunity cost, what is the cost of actually doing nothing when we actually lift our eyes, and what does life look like in 10 years, and all those things that we dream build together? If we don't actually get ourselves in the arena, how likely is that to happen? And what is the opportunity cost that exists if we don't make that happen? So that would be how I would be approaching the conversation, Ben.
Yeah, and I think if obviously his partner, Jason's partner, is a numbers person, and they do want to talk to the numbers, and right now they're seeing the red numbers being the negative in terms of the money out, and not necessarily seeing growth. Now, remembering last week we got the latest CoreLogic numbers, and we saw every capital city in Australia on their growth journey again. Melbourne and Sydney have re-entered into that growth phase. The only capital city that didn't record growth in the last 12 months, last month, was Hobart, as part of the overall mechanism there. So we would expect that interest rates are going to come down, and we'll start seeing hopefully the dial move. Because if you've got the property in, say, Melbourne or Victoria, and it hasn't performed at the level that you're hoping it to, you would expect that over the next couple of years, you're going to see a little bit of improved performance. Melbourne seems to be a flavour of the month for a lot of demand and activity that's happening at the moment. So I would then sort of say, okay, let's start measuring that. The other thing, because I would assume she would understand the power of compound. She would absolutely have that in her toolkit in terms of how that's going to grow. And the earlier you start, the better the compound you get. But we know where we get the greatest return, which is in the last third of that time period. But the other thing that I might also say to her is, let's do an internal rate of return. So let's go to her strengths. And let's do an internal rate of return analysis. Now, we often talk about this as cash on cash return. And so again, in our masterclass, we've got a little session on that. But the internal rate of return, what that does is that measures all the cash that you are putting in over time, not just the initial cash, but all of the other cash that you're putting in to control the asset over time. So, and then you start to see how much cash you've had to put in to see the overall return. And I think once she does an internal rate of return calculation, and she can be even more conservative potentially than say a 6 or a 7% compounding return. She might even want to put a 5.5 in there to be conservative. Once she works out that internal rate of return, and she'll see, wow, look at how much cash out of our household that's taken to create the wealth base that we've got. So if that's Jason's partner playing to her strengths, I would encourage her to do that internal rate of return calculation.
The dilemma with residential real estate investment, Ben, is this: the benefit is on the balance sheet, and the pain is on the cash flow statement.
Correct.
So the pain is experienced now, but the benefit is experienced on paper, and it's not until the future that you have that to fruition. So what do I mean by that? Let's assume we've got a $700,000 property that we're about to buy, and we know historically that should, if you've done
rule of 72,
if you've actually been able to execute on the rule of 72 and buy the right property, and that's an if, right? But if you've bought the right property, that $700,000 property in 10 years' time, so in 2035, will be worth 1.4 million, right? And
if it's grown at 7.2% per annum, there's the rule of 72.
There's the rule of 72. Thank you, Ben. So you've created $700,000 worth of wealth on paper. So this is the point. You've created a balance sheet net positive result, which is outstanding, and compare that to most people's superannuation, for example. So balance sheet looks good. But the problem is, and this is where Jason's wife is feeling the pain and the pinch of this whole question, is the benefits on the balance sheet, the pain is on the profit and loss statement. So what does that mean? Well, this property might cost $10,000 per annum. I'm just making that number up, Ben. Insert whatever the number is, but just because I'm a simple guy, I need the simple maths. Let's call it $10,000. That's felt today. That's pain that comes off the cash flow statement today. That's money that comes out of the household today. So, but if we did the same amount of time, 10 years, if it was 10,000, let's assume that doesn't go down, Ben. Rent goes up, all that sort of stuff. But let's assume it costs us $10,000 every year for 10 years. That's actually $100,000 worth of pain that's come out of someone's pocket. They've gone, wow, I've just tipped in 100,000 with no tangible benefit other than this balance sheet item that says that it's gone up in value. But here's where the beautiful thing comes in, right? 700,000 worth of equity that you've created. In that case, you've spent 100 to get it. net is 600 in front. And if we go back to my original point around what does our life look like in 10 years, with net 600, it's probably a lot better off. But here's the reality of what happens over that journey. You'll have paid off 10 years worth of debt on your home. You'll have, if you paid off your home during that 10 years, you will have pivoted your focus on paying off the next most expensive debt, which would probably be part of your investment property. So all of a sudden, the debt's diminished. And then all of a sudden, you have this beautiful thing that has to be experienced to really feel it, is the passive income that your assets now provide. Because most people don't feel that, Ben, because they have real estate that they use as a form of shelter, and then there's generally no income attached to it. But once you've invested in property and you feel the wonderful emotion and the wonderful peace that comes from, hang on a second, this money is coming in and I'm making money whilst I sleep. That's where the juice is. But to Jason's wife's point, that balance sheet profit and loss thing is something that can mess with your head if you can't lift your eyes.
Oh, well said. I think it's a timely reminder. I mean, there's, risk-adjusted returns at the moment, which is effectively the 10-year government bond, is sitting at around 4 to 4.5%. So in theory, that's risk-free, right? So you need to be getting a return that's greater than that 4 to 4.5%, because that's the whole idea. If you're not taking on the risk, you're not getting the additional reward. Now, if you run 4% compounding over a 30-year period, or you run 6% or 7% compounding over have a look at the variation. Have a look at the actual size. It is absolutely, well, let's just say it's surprising. You run that analysis and you'll be like, ooh, that's the power of compounding there. Now, remembering we are getting, so if we're getting a 6% capital growth and we're getting around a 3 or a 3.5%. So overall, you want to be working in from a property point of view, you want to be working in the 9% or greater as an overall return. If you're not getting that type of overall return, now, in some cases, there might be a year where the market's done nothing or it's gone backwards. You want that over a decade, right? So what you want to be analysing is, have I got over 9% overall in terms of gross return? Now, there are some costs in terms of getting that there. And then look at my internal rate of return in terms of how much cash have I actually put in to get that return? Because the value of property is we're using other people's money, i.e. leverage, sensible leverage, to be able to control a higher value of which we're getting that return on. And I think that's the combination that makes property so interesting.
So there you go, Jason. You did say your partner. You didn't say your partner's name, and we made an assumption that it was your wife. So hopefully that assumption is okay. And if it's not, we apologise. But the point of hopefully what we've provided there, Jason, is an opportunity for you to instigate a conversation, have an opportunity for you two to watch and listen back to this and see if it might be a conversation starter for the both of you. And we'd love for your feedback to see how that went. And for anyone else who may even, relate to that, Ben, let us know. Write in, give us a speak pipe. This particular topic, if you have experienced it and you've navigated it and you've overcome it, and you've got two life partners who have shared agendas in 90%, but the financial agenda wasn't quite there, and then you found a way to merge that, I promise you, I want to hear from you. Can you leave us a speak pipe on our website, thepropertycash.com.au? There's a little button there. And I promise you we'll play it, because I think this will serve our community enormously by hearing more and more stories about how people are having this conversation. Much like, Ben, when we invite a guest onto the Property Couch, we ask them to tell us about their money backstory. There is a very premeditated reason why we do that, because we want to start conversations in households from as young as we possibly can. So this will be an enormous benefit. So if that's you, write in, leave us a speak pipe. All right, thank you for that, Jason. Next question comes from Ross. Ross has a question around how should I structure my lending when it comes to investment properties and my principal place of residence, Ben? And this one's a speak pipe, so let's have a little listen.
G'day guys, it's Monty here. Thanks for the amazing work and the great content you produce each and every week on the podcast. My wife and I are very fortunate to have 3 properties. We have our principal place of residence in Sydney with roughly $300,000 owing on that. We have an investment property up in Brisbane, which we've had for roughly 10 years. And our second investment property is in Perth, which we've had for 3 years. All 3 properties are in separate loans and they're not linked at all. Obviously, the last couple of years, we've seen significant growth across all 3 properties, and we're looking at purchasing our third investment property sometime this year. The question I had was, is it beneficial to release equity from either of the investment properties, or is it better to release more equity from our principal place of residence? Over the next 5 years or so, we're looking at upgrading our principal place of residence, and I wondered that if we released equity from our Sydney home, would that have implications down the track when we actually sell that Sydney home to upgrade our principal place of residence? Being teachers, my wife and I, we're always interested to learn as much as we can, and that's where you guys have been amazing over the last 10 years or so. It would be great for any information you could provide. Obviously, we want to do the best for our 3 kids, and hopefully we can help them out in the future. So any information you have on this topic would be greatly appreciated. Thanks again for the great work you do, and up the mighty Swannies in 2025. Thanks, guys.
There you go, Ben. First of all, I think we should just take a moment to reflect and honour on teachers' wages. They've been able to build a property portfolio and got the timing right in the last 3 years, I might add. And
Oh, yeah.
so getting to this point, bravo, well done.
Monty's had a Monty. He's done a ripper job there. So Ross, Monty, as you like to refer to yourself. Hey, what a tremendous job. I actually would love, find me, work out how to get in contact with me, because 2 teacher salaries, to be able to have 3 kids, to have a house in Sydney, and to have 2 investment properties, you are very, very good money managers. I can
I'm hearing summer series guest, Ben. I don't know about you, but it feels very summer series guest to me. I think that's the call out to Monty.
That is incredible. Like, what a great story. You know, the only challenge you've got is the Swannies. Now let's bring it real, Monty. Let's bring it real. All right, here's the deal, right? There's an important little trigger that you put in there that I've got lots of questions about around upgrading your principal place of residence, right? Because yes, there's no doubt that you were in a good position to potentially acquire that third investment property, and you've got a 5-year window, is what you're saying, around your principal place of residence. Where I would want to do some scenario modelling is around, if your dream location and your forever home is going to be in a location that's growing quicker than you potentially can save to get into, then the reality is that I would be thinking maybe more of the owner-occupied model and trying to work out how I can potentially upgrade into that home than potentially taking on a third investment property at this moment in time. Now, again, I'm speculating here, so I don't want to speculate. I don't know what that would look like. But that is a curiosity for me. So that would be something that I'd want to address. In addition to that, and so why am I saying that? I'm saying, well, if you buy that property sooner, it means it's going to cost you less, and you're going to have less owner-occupied debt, and you're going to be in your forever location, forever home. So that ticks that box. We can always circle back and add an additional property on there, all ultimately depending on what's the end game. Where do you want to get to, right, Bryce?
Yeah, North Star. So you raise a really, really important point. I think they should really consider that strongly about their principal place of residence, because if they wait 5 years, to your point, they're going to have a higher debt potentially around that. But my initial response with this is, what's the goal? Do you actually need a third property? Was my first answer. Because if you talk about getting locations right, Ben, PPR in Sydney, had a Brisbane property 10 years ago and had a Perth property 3 years ago. Like, that's a beautiful timing story there, folks, just as a borderless investor. So
So, Bryce, I'm just thinking, have we promised each of the three kids one property each?
Yeah. I'll have to send him one. Thanks, Dad. So Monty, so that I think that's a really, really important question for the both of you to consider, which is, do you actually need a third? What are you going for? Is it 2,000 a week passive? Is it 1,500 a week passive? Is it 3,000 a week? Because then what we do is we use that as our line in the sand and then actually work out what we actually need to do. Because if you've got aggressive goals, 3,000 is not enough, or you are just someone who is going to be one of the outliers who gets more than 2 investment properties. Once you get into 3, which you're about to get into, you get into very rare air in this country. You just might have a predisposition for that. You might be someone who just loves it, loves the game, and so cool. I get that. But my first question would be this: do you actually need a third, or do you need to spend all of your time, energy, and effort reducing the debt in the existing portfolio, so that ultimately, when you do move into the desired principal place of residence in 5 years' time, you're doing it with the minimal amount of debt that you possibly can, and of course, building up money and offsets so that it gives you opportunities to keep existing properties. If you existing PPR as an investment property is part of that discussion too, that might be part of the mix. But I'd and you talked the way you've structured this question. It sounds like this is what it sounds like to me. That all of the portfolio is secured against your principal place of residence. So it sounds like your investment properties probably have 80 or 90% loans against them, and then all of the remaining debt is secured against the principal place of residence. So to your question, I think most people feel comfortable protecting their principal place of residence at all costs. When they increase the amount of risk that they're taking by building a principal place of portfolio, by being able to quarantine the essential need with a roof over their house, roof over their head, that's super important. So you've got separate loans, you've got probably secured against the principal place of residence. That's important. But investment savvy mortgage broker would eat this up in a heartbeat, because they'd probably go and look to release as much equity as you can from the investment properties, whilst quarantining as much as possible the exposure to your principal place of residence.
So let me have a shot. I'll put my investment savvy mortgage broker hat on, and of course the question that Monty's probably saying, it's a serviceability story, Ben, in terms of the principal home. Now, obviously with the 3% buffer. Now, we do know that the Liberal National Party are going to look at potentially adjusting that. So that will potentially allow for greater borrowing capacity. So that's something that we've got to think about with an upcoming election. In addition to that, what I will say about this structuring story. So people might sort of say, well, I want to try and keep my owner-occupied home risk-free by not having any loans secured or any security risk against that. The reality is it doesn't sort of really matter, but from a structuring point of view, this is where it does get interesting. So let's hypothetically assume that we're not worried about buying the principal home now. So we're going to buy this third investment property. So depending on the price of that third investment property, we're going to get an 80% loan against that property. Okay, so that is going to be secured, and there's going to be no cross securitization with any property. So there's the 80%. So for funds to complete, we're going to roughly need another 25%. Okay, so depending on the price point, that's going to determine, and how much equity we've got in those other properties is going to determine just how many additional loan splits that we need. Okay, so let's say hypothetically, to complete that 25%, we need 200,000. Well, let's say in one property we've got 120,000 in equity, and we've got 80,000 in one of the other properties in equity, the 2 investment properties. Then it just means from an administrative point of view, you're going to have 3 loans that relate to this property investment. So it just means, look, and I promise you, having, I think I've got about 14 loans currently across my portfolio. The reality is once you set them up, it really doesn't matter. I mean, Remember, all income goes into your primary account against your owner-occupied debt in your offset account. And then, and that's all, that money's flowing in. And then you're just making repayments because they're all on autopilot, right? They're all direct debits coming out of that particular one hubbed account. So it doesn't really matter that there's three. And of course, if you're using the Moorr platform, you add all of those three up and it'll show that in your property portfolio area anyway. So you'll get to see your peak debt pretty easily anyway. But that is the trade-off, as opposed to, let's say, in your family home, assuming it's worth, over $1 million being a Sydney property, you might have that 200,000 comfortably in equity, or you could just take one loan out against that security. Now, that doesn't really increase any additional risk against your principal home. The only risk against your principal home is if you can't manage your debts. If you can't manage your debts, well, you're going to sell one or two of those properties. So it's an arbitrary debate about whether it's secured against your home or whether it's secured against your investment properties. But I understand why a lot of people choose to, keep their family home protected in a sort of state of mind point of view, but there's no real logical reason for it. So as I close out my argument here in terms of it doesn't really matter, but if you did do it against your principal home because you only wanted one extra loan instead of two, hypothetically, or you just do in 5 years' time, if you followed that principle and upgraded your family home, you just do a substitution of security, right? So you just move that loan across. So anytime you're doing a portfolio move, your investment savvy broker will be sitting down with you and we're saying, all right, let's value each of the properties. Let's see what additional equity we've got. And let's see if we can tidy that up. And then over time, what you do is you do move, and this is what's happening with my Flemington property, is you do move all of the loans into one loan. Okay, so you started off with two or three or whatever you did to get the equity out to buy, and then you collapse them up into the one loan secured against that property. And that just happens over time. You bring the debt down over time, and then ultimately, and the value of the property goes up. So as soon as you get to that 80% LVR, you start tidying up the extra loans, you discharge them, and you move it all into one facility to just make life a little bit easier from an admin point of view.
Good question, Monty. Let's summarise. Number one, what's your goal? Do you actually need a third investment property? Number two is, if you are going to buy another forever home in 5 years' time, is it worth actually thinking about that now, so you lock in today's price rather than 5 years from now? And third, the language of Ben then was that of an investment savvy mortgage broker. Some of that stuff that Ben talked about, he riffed it as if it like, oh, sure, but he's been doing it for a long time, right? So all I'd say is an investment savvy mortgage broker would actually help you get that structure right. And some of the things that Ben said, 14 loan splits, structuring them up, collapsing later, if that makes sense to you now, wonderful. For those in the community where that's like, whew, that's a lot, no problem. You just take your time. That'll all make sense as you go along your journey. But yeah, you're in a wonderful position, Monty. Thank you for sending that question in. Hopefully the community gets benefit from that as well. And I'm going to say it again to you, Monty. That very much sounds like a summer series guest if I have ever seen one. So please reach out to me. I think that there's something that we would love to unpack in that story a little further to see how you've done it. Ben, next question is from Tom Forrestal, and he's sent us some, well, loosely, he sent you some chocolates in the past. He sent you some chocolate-coated...
the team, that they were enjoyed by all.
Chocolate-coated almonds. What did I get, mate? I got
well,
some...
if you come up from Torquay to the office, you might actually get some chocolate.
No, you forget. It was faux grass, remember? He got the...
Oh, that's right.
The grass.
I said, well, I left the grass for you. Yeah, that's
so we love Tom's sense of humour, but he's got a question here around principal and interest only. Now, he... tic-tac with us on email, and I said, hey, listen, I think this is a good bit of feedback that we could share with the community, and he's all for it. So here's what Tom had to say, and then we'll address it, Ben. Hi, team. I've been debating whether to bother you with this or not, as it may be a very rudimentary misunderstanding of mine, but after Thursday's episode nearly addressed it, and after doing some time consulting with Opti, Ben, which is our WhatsApp where you can go and let AI talk to our entire back catalogue. So if you're interested in using AI in the Property Couch,
our podcast companion,
click on this link here on the screen or on in the show notes. You can go and check that out. So after consulting with Opti to see if you had a different app, I wonder if I'm not alone in a knowledge gap I had before working with Joel. I've only ever had interest-only loans, and as a result, know very little about the mechanics of principal and interest loans, in brackets, as I imagine many first home buyers or maybe other investor-only owner-occupiers like me may have too, close bracket. During the planning with Joel, I learned that an offset against a principal and interest loan doesn't change the monthly repayment amount, just the proportion of the principal and the interest that's paid each month, i.e. it improves the debt position, but not the monthly cash flow. Admittedly, I have not cut a full lap. I've not listened to 273 through to 494. Tisk, Ben. What's he been doing?
Yeah, terrible. Come on, pick up your game.
So excuse me if it's mentioned in these eps. Asking Opti, it pointed me to episode 448, where you skirt around it, but not explicitly mention it. To summarize, before being corrected by Joel, even after listening to nearly 300 episodes,
thank you for that, Tom.
No, thank you, Tom. My previous naive understanding was that offsetting any debt improved cash flow as well as lowered interest paid. So I had grand plans where I could park company money into a home offset from time to time to improve cash flow, which I realize now is silly. But again, if I'm thinking it, then maybe others might too. There's the point of this story, Ben. If I'm thinking it, maybe others might too.
They certainly are thinking it too.
Have we missed an opportunity here, Ben, to clarify this? We're not going to miss it any further. So for clarity, I'm not explicitly looking for an improved cash flow position. Paying a future home loan off earlier is fine by me. I was just so accustomed to the cash flow benefit of offsets on IO loans and never really bridged the gap of how P&I worked in practice. I felt adequately foolish after we finished the meeting that day, but at the same time validated the choice to pay for the big guns. Oh, Joel will be happy to hear about that. I'll leave it to you to do as you wish. Thanks again for all you do, Tom. Ben, is that an opportunity for us to correct?
It is an opportunity for us
to educate our audience,
to do some teaching. And thanks, Tom, for clarifying that, because I think it really is quite interesting. And so I'm going to do my best attempt. I'm going to whack my investment savvy mortgage hat on again and try and explain it to people. So let's assume you take out a 30-year loan. That 30-year loan, as per your loan documents, you'll be able to read up about this, will have in there a repayment schedule of 360 months, for which, yes, that is 30 years, for which the loan calculation is amortising as per that schedule. So at the very start, at the peak level of your debt, the vast majority of the repayments that you are making are technically interest.
Boo!
And there's just a little slither of principal that you're starting to eat away.
It's a raw. We should start a bank, Ben.
We should, because at the end of the day, those 360 months are set repayment calculations based on the interest rate as per the principal and interest schedule. Okay, so when Tom is right, when he says, well, with interest only, it does have a massive cash flow impact because you're not paying any of that principal off, right? Mm. And again, if you also have loans set at 25 years or 30, and in some cases now lenders do 35 and 40-year lending, some of the second-tier lenders, that is basically saying that amortization piece goes over longer, which means that the monthly repayments are impacted at a lower level, which means you improve your cash flow. So I did some investigation because it triggered me as well. So I went off and said, in Australia, the vast majority of our mainstream lenders use that methodology, right? So it basically means that, and even if I've got $100,000 sitting in an offset account and I've got a $500,000 loan, but I'm getting interest reduced or calculated on a $400,000 balance on a daily basis, my repayment schedule is still the same. So I couldn't find any respectable lenders that would actually make those adjustments in real time, because at the end of the day, they may be in breach of their obligations in terms of the contract that you've engaged with. Now, that said, I'll take a little bit of liberty here and just do a little side thing here. What we also know that if you do have a cash flow crisis, and this is anyone that we're talking to in our community, and you want to be able to improve or reduce the monthly repayments that you're making because you've hit a little cash flow crisis or whatever, you can talk to your bank about how you would potentially recalibrate that, right? So there's several ways in which you can recalibrate those repayments over the final term of the loan. So you can extend the loan term, which is one of the classic ways of doing it. You can forego any lending or any money in advance in redraw that you might have, and then they'll just recalibrate that, which means they'll set the new loan balance and then do the remaining term and calculate that. So that's another way in which you can do it in terms of adjusting cash flows. But the easiest way to adjust cash flows is to have interest only. The challenge with that, as we know, is that the banks will sting us a little bit extra in terms of the interest rate that we pay. It's not great, is it? And if it's an investment property, they'll even sting us again, in terms of a penalty of charging us high interest. There's no logical reason other than profitability that they're doing that, because there's no evidence to suggest that investors are more risky than owner-occupied borrowers. But unfortunately, that's the premium we have to pay under the current rules and regulations that we have. Now, hopefully one day a good lender will come into market. You're saying, Bryce, we should go and set up our own bank. If we ever do set up our own bank, guess what we're going to do? We're going to make sure that investors pay the same rate as owner-occupiers do. Wouldn't that be good?
Mate, then we'd be in the same alumni as Aussie John, who started it back in the 90s, Ben.
Yes, well, who made that change, who got that. So that's what competition does, and that's why free markets are always healthy for competition. Okay, so hopefully I've explained that in reasonable terms. Just think of a loan amortising over time. It's those repayments are set. Now, when the RBA adjusts interest rates up or down, you'll get a letter from your bank and they'll say, here's what the new calculation will be that calibrates that loan finishing on that 30-year loan term. Now, of course, if we've got money that we use in offset, that loan term still says that period of time, but we get to fast track, the debt payment down. All right. So to finish off that question for Tom, let's say you did have money in offset for a good 5-year period and it was a meaningful amount. Then technically you would be in advance on the amount of principal that you've paid. And so that's what I was saying before about recalibrating that. If you want to reduce your cash, the repayments to a lower level, and you can potentially negotiate that with your bank as part of that story.
Thank you, Ben. Very well explained. Hopefully that's, we tic-tacked with Tom on that via email, so he's fully across that. But a good question for him to ask. And I want to encourage our community to ask questions like that. Is there something that you and I take for granted that we haven't gone enough in the weeds on, that you want further explanation? And if that's the case,
we'd love to share.
Yeah, we love these questions. So thank you, Tom. Really good question. So Ben, thank you to all of our questions today. Thank you, Tom. Thank you to Monty, and also thank you to Jason. Some really good questions. So I just want to remind folks that we love Q&A Day. If you go to thepropertycouch.com.au, you will find a little button there. You press a button, you record your question, I get them, I put them into the episodes, and we get to answer them. So just as a little guiding rule for that, Ben, any question that gets super specific about a person's details, unfortunately, I don't necessarily go for. It's the ones where they ask a framework or a specific question, but then can chunk it out so that we can educate the rest of the community. They are the ones like this. So this is a perfect example from Tom. Had a misunderstanding about a fundamental part of a framework that was specific to him, but in answering the question, it benefited
serve the community,
every single person. So there we go. Thank you, folks. Hey, Ben, my life hack today is to the parents. Obviously, a lot of these hacks are stuff that's rattling around in my brain with my life at the minute. So as a parent of a almost 14-year-old and a 12-year-old, my eldest went to camp this week. And so it provided an opportunity this morning that that my wonderful wife sort of nudged me. She goes, "Hey, look, I think you should go and take him out on a date." And I went, my youngest, who's still at home, my eldest is at camp. So she goes, "I think you should take him out on a date." And I went, "Oh, what a great idea!" So he and I got up early, Ben, and we went and had a brekkie date before school. And for those watching at home, you're actually going to see some imagery of that. And we got to see the sunrise, and we had an amazing time where we hung out together. And all it took, Ben, so I want to reassure, if someone says, "Oh, that's right for you, Bryce, you're financially independent." No, okay. Here's what we did. We shared a breakfast, and we got 2 drinks. So the cost was quite minimal, but the benefit was
the value
enormous, right? We created some memories. He and I bonded over a bunch of things this morning, and we got to see the sunrise together. And then I just dropped him off at school, which was really cool. Didn't cost much, but as my wife said to me as she nudged me, she goes, "He will remember that for a long time." So my life hack today is to the parents who have camp age children, and one of them goes to camp and one of them's left behind. Now, I don't have a life hack for people who have 3 and 4 kids, Ben. So it's I've got 2 kids. So for those who have 3 or 4 kids, you've got to hope that the camps line up so that one's still left at home. But it was a very cost-effective way to build a memory with my son, which was really, really
mate, it's a great life hack. And here's the challenge, mate. You're starting to show me up. Thank God my boys don't listen to this podcast. When are you taking us out for breakfast?
Yeah. Well, I do live in the same.
Well done. Brilliant. So. Yeah, it's very, very good. You're a great dad, and you've got an amazing wife who's a great mum. So obviously, the kids are growing up beautifully.
Very kind. Thank you, mate. Hey, mate, what's making property news?
Well, Bryce, obviously, last week was a huge week, where the world was set on fire. The economic world was set on fire by one particular gentleman who thinks that a particular nation that he's the president of has had a tough deal, hasn't had a fair run, and he's going to make America great again, and he's going to make all of this money come back into America. And that is what I'm talking about, is obviously the tariffs, which, Evan and I last week were also terrifying. Did you like the headline?
Oh, Ben, I saw what you did there.
Yeah, well done to our team for terrifying. I thought that was pretty good. Anyway, let's get to what it means for us. So I'll give a very holistic view. I'm not going to take too much time up. It's not so much the 10%. I think, as we've seen before, when nations don't take our goods, we're pretty good at finding new markets. So, in terms of that, and of course, we don't send a lot of our produce into the US. They do very similar things to us. So we don't have a big opening in that marketplace for that. But what it does do is it certainly impacts a lot of our trading partners who we do a lot of trade with, namely China, namely Japan, namely most of these Southeast Asian countries, where we do a lot of importing of their goods. And so all of a sudden, the reality is not so much about what they bring into us. In fact, some could argue that now we become a more interesting trading partner for them because there may be less demand from the American market. But that is the problem here. The problem here for us is that in terms of our GDP, if China and those countries' economic activity slows, they are not necessarily going to buy as much of our goods. All right. So that ultimately means that our economy slows as well. And so that is the big story here for us. And no one really knows how it's going to all play out and, what Trump is really going to do. But effectively, he's going hard on this. He did say there is a detox period. There is going to be this hard period that they're going to go through. Now, what does that also mean from a interest rate point of view? And I think this is the interesting thing about what it's going to mean for domestically for property prices here. So we've already heard stories around potentially additional rate cuts. So if this is true, if our economy is going to slow, then what you are going to see is the Reserve Bank is going to have to make some judgment calls about the inflationary impact, but a potentially broader story here about the overall economic activity. Now, we know lower interest rates means cost of money gets cheaper. That means business investment happens here. That means activity flows. And so that's a way of reducing the potential economic impact to our overall economy and keeping people employed. So we've heard stories about potentially another 4 rate cuts. So that type of number is really meaningful in terms of borrowing power and potentially demand for existing property. So that is just something that I want. I'm not saying rush in, you got to get in tomorrow. You got to, like, ultimately you should be actively looking to invest in property or buying property when you can comfortably afford it and when you also have job security. But there's no doubt that this is going to increase the interest in property around, what's going to happen over the next 6 to 12 months if this really does play out at the level that he has proposed last week.
You've got to admire some of what he's doing, right? Because he campaigned on Make America Great Again, and he's delivering on that. So from their perspective, he's unlike anyone else who's come in and said they're going to make some change. And I was recently watching an interview by the mainstream media to Elon Musk and the Doge team, and it was actually really fair reporting, which was kind of nice to see, right? But it was it's come at an incredible cost to Elon in terms of his business interests, his commercial interests, all those sorts of things that he's doing. But some of the group of people, I think there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in the interview, and they are some really incredibly intellectual horsepower, talent from Silicon Valley, and CEOs and people who have just come and seen it as a patriotic act to come and do it. And so some of the costs that they're cutting seem to be legitimate. And so when asked about what about the criticism you receive, he goes, we seem to get the criticism about us personally rather than when we go, well, what would you do if you were just spending $1 billion for that and there was no accountability? And people just go, well, because so it's what they're actually doing seems reasonable. It's just obviously some of the propaganda that comes with it. So if you're within the walls of America, he said what he said he would do. But to your point, when America sneezes, Australia catches a cold. So it's interesting to see what happens with the rest of the world and see how that flows through to us. So
there's really trillions of dollars that have been wiped off stock markets, which are effectively wiped out of pension funds and superannuation funds and the like.
Yeah.
So then the question is, where does that money come back from? Like that's just completely gone. Now, he's saying that the markets will boom. And, part of their promise here is if they can bring the money in through the government, they want to eliminate personal tax for under $150,000. So 0 tax rate for people who live in America earning under $150,000 US.
Yeah.
So that's the trade-off that they're trying to do. So, okay, yeah, you're going to pay a little bit more for your goods because we've got all these expensive tariffs on all the imports, but we're going to offset that by basically making no tax for you. So you'll be able to still afford those goods and still have a quality of life. And obviously his other great theory is that all of those jobs will be relocated back into the middle America, and all of these factories will be built, and all of these people will get these jobs. That's the bit that's hard to reconcile, given robots and AI and everything else.
It's global.
It's unfortunately that's the hard bit. That's the hard sell.
Yeah, the internet made us global, so it's not like in the old days where it was hard to get that information.
So, it's moved on from an experiment, and I'm sort of maybe the better wording now is a bit of a gamble. That they're gambling on this play. And look, in business, you take these calculated risks. The businessmen are running the White House, some businessmen, and we all know Trump's history as a businessman. Lots of bad, some good, in terms of, things have gone broke and things have gone all right. So he's got a mixed history in terms of running businesses. So let's see how he goes in terms of the next, because he's really only got probably, he's got enough goodwill to run this strategy for maybe 24 months maximum. I think they'll get pretty shitty after 12 months. Yeah. So let's see what happens.
Oh, well, he'll just get it in his third term.
Well, yeah,
Let's
that's
not
right.
open that one up.
Let's not go there. Let's not go there.
Very good. Another good episode today, mate. Again, thank you to our guests who contributed to the questions today. They were really good, and I want to encourage anyone who wants to contribute to future episodes, go to thepropertycouch.com.au / oh, no, there's no even / there's a button on the homepage.
Button.
It's a yellow button. You can't miss it. Just press the button and record. But, mate, until next week.
Knowledge is empowering, Bryce, but only if you act on it.
Only if you act on it, folks. See you next week.